Welcome to John. John is doing a session renewing the role of the church in cross-cultural marketplace mission. And John has had extensive experience in the Filipino Muslim community and has been involved with OMF international leadership. And I don't know how long you've been based in Toronto, for a while now?
8 years.
8 years, okay. So I'll turn it over to you and you can add anything more that's relevant. We're looking forward to this.
Thank you. I'll say a little bit more about my journey, but let me start with Daniel's story. So I met Daniel in Tokyo. Daniel works as in the IT world. He's an IT specialist, works for a Japanese company, Australian, has a huge heart for missions, loves the Lord, and loves the Japanese. And I met with him because I had been encouraged to get to know Daniel as someone who really understood what it meant to disciple people through his vocation. And we had a really good, encouraging conversation. I've met with him a number of times since. And as I do with all marketplace people, after listening for an hour or two to their context and their stories, I asked them, well, how are you able to, through your vocation, disciple people? And Daniel, unlike many marketplace people, was able to immediately tell me 4 things that he was doing. And one of them was leading hiking clubs and taking his Japanese coworkers out on the mountains around Tokyo, and then inviting some missionaries who have a deeper understanding of Japanese spiritual language and who have more theological training along on those trips. And then together they would talk about everything, including Jesus. But what was interesting in that particular conversation is Daniel had brought a friend, Phil, who was also working in business. He was in an accounting company that you would probably recognize if I told you the name. And Phil was also passionate about the Lord, passionate about Jesus, working hard on Japanese and looking at discipling his co-workers. When we got talking about their relationships with their church, though, there was a distinct difference. Daniel was able to talk about his church back in Australia that strongly supported him, was praying for him, didn't need to send money to him because his job covered his costs, but prayed for him, encouraged him. I turned to Phil and said, what about you? And he said, oh, my church, I don't really have any relationship with a church. And I said, well, really, why not? And he said, yeah, my church didn't understand what I was doing. They thought I was just taking a job in Tokyo and they weren't interested, and I didn't know how to talk to them about it. And so we just lost touch. And so Phil said he was, he's taking a year, 6 months off paid leave because his company, unpaid leave, but his company was holding his job so he could improve his Japanese. And Daniel said, well, maybe your church would help with that. And Phil said, no, my church doesn't really care or understand, and I've lost touch. And that felt just so sad. And that's really was sort of the beginning of the journey. I'm not a marketplace guy. I'm a traditional cross-cultural missionary, worked with Muslims in the southern Philippines. But I've come to really see the importance of the marketplace mission movement. And in my research, began to be really interested in the role of the church. I think for those of you who, and I think I'm speaking to the converted here, but Neil Johnson some years ago said that the marketplace is the only institution that touches directly or indirectly virtually every person on planet Earth in one way or another. It's a pervasive part of every society, culture, and people group. It is found in the midst of every religion and every political system in every historic era. So that the incarnational model of missions will take us right into the marketplace. Ed Silvoso said the marketplace is the last mission frontier. And very recently at the Global Workplace Forum, Lausanne, Michael O said, you don't exist to help professional ministry leaders fulfill the Great Commission. We exist to help you do it. He said that to workplace and marketplace people. So it's encouraging to see marketplace ministry grow and develop. But I have a growing concern, which my research, I think, has affirmed, that the church is a missing part of this. So let me just tell you a little bit of that history. So in 2016, the Canadian Evangelical Mission Engagement Survey was done by the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. It's the largest survey of evangelicals done in Canada. 2,200 lay people and 1,400 pastors. And we asked about 80 plus questions, but there was one question statement that we particularly asked pastors. Well, we asked them 80 something questions, but this one was one of those. Our local church would consider sending a professional or a business owner to intentionally live and work abroad as a missionary. And the responses, frankly, surprised me. So of all the responses, 28% strongly agreed and 40% moderately agreed, 9% moderately disagreed, 4% strongly disagreed, and 18% didn't know. And I was just a one-off question. I was actually more interested in other questions. But when the results came back, And I looked at that, I thought, wow. So I don't experience 68% of Canadian churches being actually interested in cross-cultural marketplace mission. But 68% of the pastors we talked to said that they moderately or strongly agreed with that. And I really wondered, well, are they actually doing anything? What is actually being done in that space? Because anecdotally, I didn't see evidence of that. So I worked with EFC, and we did a survey. So that highlights just that 68% was what I saw as the key thing. So in my research, I was able to return to was 818 pastors that actually had said that they were open to a follow-up survey. And 791 of them ended up being the ones who actually were available for various reasons. Some of the folk had passed away or had changed jobs. And so I was able to ask 17 questions of them. And then I also did a focus group with 10 young marketplace or potential marketplace mission workers, just trying to validate some of the results of the survey. So the survey was done in late 2019, and the focus group ran just before the pandemic. In fact, the second meeting of the focus group was done virtually. So I just want to walk through some of those survey results and some of the implications I saw from that. So the first question, other than some demographic question, was to just repeat the original question that we asked. So again, we asked our local church of the pastor how they would respond to the statement, our local church would consider sending a professional or a business owner to intentionally live and work abroad as a missionary. And I just put in brackets, that is, as a marketplace worker, in order to bring that back. And there were 185 responses to that. And what was fascinating and encouraging and not unexpected is that compared to the previous question asked of the same people, this percentage of strongly agree went up significantly. So 28% was the original, and up to 42% of the responses of the respondents said they strongly agreed, and 39% of the respondents, so that's said moderately agree. So that's 1% down from the previous 40%. So that total comes to just over 80% of the people strongly or moderately agreed with that statement, and that's an increase of over 10%. Expected because people were opting into this survey, and so we thought there probably would be a bump, and there was. It's interesting to note that also, and not unexpected, that the don't know was cut in half, went from 18 to 9%, and the growth was on the strongly agree. So the shift was that direction. That was helpful because it just confirmed that I was working with, it confirmed that observation that pastors, or at least it suggested to us, the results suggested to us that pastors that were surveyed were positive about the model. But the second question was then very important because we wanted to see if we could find out something about what was actually being done. So we asked the same pastors, in the last 5 years, how many professionals or business owners has your church sent to intentionally live and work cross-culturally as marketplace workers for longer than 1 year? So we were trying to get at what actually was happening in the Canadian church through this survey. And as you can see, 80%, just under 80%, 78.92%, 146 churches responded that their church had not done anything in the past 5 years. So they hadn't sent one. And then just over 10% had sent one marketplace, and another 10% having sent 2 or 3. So what we ended up, and I'll just show you the actual table with that. So you can see the numbers of percentage there, and then the number of churches. So this response just appears to suggest that the interest in marketplace mission amongst pastors is not reflected in current church practice. While nearly 80% of the pastors surveyed viewed marketplace mission positively, only 20% of their churches had actually sent anyone in the last 5 years. We would love to change that. This is really where a lot of my work has been focused for the last year, is how can we actually leverage the apparent strong interest among pastors to increase the actual church engagement from 20% to 40%, 50%, 60%, because we believe that if churches caught a vision and were acting on that vision in various ways, that would significantly strengthen the marketplace cross-cultural mission movement globally. I just wanted to illustrate another aspect of this. If we just take a cross-section and look at the churches that actually had experience in sending and not experience, you can see that even the churches that had no experience were relatively positive about the model. So don't know, was majority not experienced, looking at the left-hand side. But even the strongly agree and moderately agree was a good mix of those who have experience. So it wasn't that experienced people were overly negative on the model. And you can also see on the right-hand screen, you can see, if you look at the number of professionals sent by churches with experience, there is a significant number of churches that had sent workers there are a good number of people who sent workers who respond positively to the model. So we were encouraged with that. There was only one church out of those who responded somewhat negatively to the church that had actually sent a marketplace worker. And others, all the rest of those churches with experience responded positively to the model. There were a few other questions we asked, just trying to understand the church's involvement in this. And so we asked, for instance, where have you sent? And it was interesting to just note that there was a strong emphasis on East Asia, not China, and on China. That's a particular interest to me because of OMF's work in East Asia. I was a bit surprised, frankly, that the Middle East and North Africa weren't higher on that, because they're significant areas of need for marketplace, because they're creative access nations or places where a traditional missionary visa is not available. It was also interesting to note that cross-culturally within Canada was a significant, there were a good number of people in our survey who responded that they were sending people cross-culturally within Canada, and that's something that we want to do some more looking at. We looked also at what kind of roles there were for cross-cultural involvement. And you can see that teaching English still is very, very common amongst marketplace workers working cross-culturally and working in the educational services. There may be a bit of ambiguity there, because I did not, in hindsight, I wish I had put working in the educational services, not teaching English. And so that category may be a bit artificially high. But developing a for-profit business was also quite high. So there are indications here of places where there is good focus and other places where more work could be done. It's interesting to me that I've had a number of conversations with people in the IT sector, but there didn't seem to be something that was common amongst churches that had sent. And this question and the previous question actually were asked only of the 39 churches out of the total sample that said that they had sent workers. Another area where we wanted to understand is, how has your church been involved in marketplace work with marketplace workers? And so we listed a number of options, and it was encouraging to see that prayer was high. It came out as the highest response. In some ways not surprising, and also quite hard to measure. So, I would like to do more work in that space. But financially supporting them was also actively mentioned by the pastors. It surprised me a little bit, and I'll look at this a bit more in a minute, because I didn't expect churches to be that involved financially, because most marketplace workers have their own financial support and so aren't dependent on churches. On the other hand, this may reflect the fact that churches generally aren't engaging with people in ways that they understand, and so they look for financial opportunities. It was interesting to me, in light of something I'll show you in a minute, that the training option was not very high, because as we'll see in a question in a minute, that was an area of highest concern for pastors. They say that there's a lack of cross-cultural and theological training, and yet when we asked what they were actually doing, there wasn't a huge number that had training as a priority. I just mentioned this also briefly because this question asked, how has your church been involved financially with your marketplace worker? And we gave a number of options to the marketplace workers of ways in which they could have been involved, providing funding for training, providing funding for special needs, giving personally but not through the church. And the most common response was that they had provided regular funding for the marketplace worker through an agency or partner organization. It would be interesting to find out how those funds were being channeled and used, because as we would normally expect, most marketplace workers are funded by a salary. But there are many more traditional marketplace workers who work in a context where full funding is not enough through their vocational income. And so there is probably a balance here, and there would need to be more work done. One of the comments from one of the pastors that I thought was helpful, he said in the comment bar, a lot of people struggle with the idea of financially supporting someone who earns a wage, but just in a different context. And we did hear this from others too, that this idea of financial support mitigated against the idea of them being considered a missionary. So if they need finances, and then, are they even a missionary? And there is a kind of conflation of some things in that space. So we take away from this that marketplace workers need to look at this closely in terms of communication about their financial need and transparency about their the space, the way that finances are being used. We also noted that there's a need. We asked a question about churches' involvement with mission agencies, and I just want to highlight that the outside agency introduced to the church by the worker is the most common way in which finance workers are involved. Churches are seeing themselves connected with financial workers. When we asked them about their involvement directly in supporting marketplace mission thinking, and this question was asked of all of the churches, not just those who were actually had been actively involved. I just want to highlight, there were a number of things. You can see the options there, and it was good to see a diversity there. It was encouraging to us that taught and or preached on vocation as calling was the most common way in which churches supported the development of marketplace mission thinking. And this is significant because we wanted to see how significant or how important this was in the church context. So that was 106 out of 164 respondents who said that. And this is mapping just the total number of respondents. As I've worked with people, I see that it was really important to lay that foundation. One respondent talked about gently laying some theological groundwork. Another respondent said, as the lead pastor, I have done 2 sermon series on marketplace ministry, but that has been focused on people living out their vocation here in Canada as ministry, not cross-culturally. And so we feel that this is important as a foundation for the marketplace ministry, and I'll talk about that briefly in a minute. Other pastors, though, one pastor commented, this is a brand new concept, so my missions committee is exploring ways to help people see that this is valid missions. Another pastor honestly wrote, never thought or talked about it. So there was encouragement and disencouragement. I think the one I liked best, we are calling our people to discipleship in the workplace. Our hope is that some will catch a vision to work and live in hard places. And that is very much what we would like to see. We also asked them what issue they felt was the most significant as a negative, that marketplace workers don't have enough for effective cross-cultural ministry. And this chart is maybe a little bit confusing, but if you look at the bottom here, the longer red bars indicate the most significant negative response, because we asked them to rate the response. So cross-cultural training and theological training, the lack of training was the most common response, the most significant response that pastors indicated in the survey. And this, it seems to us, is a clear opportunity for traditional agencies and Bible training institutions to partner with churches in order to address these training needs. It's not surprising marketplace workers don't traditionally have time to go through a normal theological training course. They don't often have time to go through traditional missiological training. So one of our problems is that agencies and churches have the ability, they have the training, the resources, but the delivery model doesn't work for the marketplace. So we are working to try and address that. One pastor said, we are transitioning to include a strong invitation and training and sending of marketplace workers. Right now, we're working on the training component as we identify those who are potential marketplace workers. The concern about time was raised as an issue, and this has come up on field leaders that I've talked to. They would say something like, I would love to have marketplace workers on our team, but they are so busy with work, they have no time for ministry. I think that that comment betrays a sacred secular divide, because marketplace workers, when they hear field leaders, traditional missionary field leaders say that, they say, no, no, our work is our ministry. What we want is help to be effective as disciple workers at the work, not to do our work and then on the side do something with a traditional mission team. And so there is work to be done to help our field teams understand the significance of coming alongside marketplace workers in their context, giving them training, giving them discipleship, helping them to be accountable for their time, because they want to be effective disciple makers. One pastor commented, overcoming the traditional beliefs of some who see full-time workers as the best cross-cultural mission worker is a challenge. In fact, the opposite is the truth. So it is a real challenge to work through how best to do that. I think I just want to pick up some of the other comments. So one of the pastors commented, challenge for my local church concerning marketplace mission is embracing a mindset that moves from a more traditional approach to mission. One pastor said, a great vision if we could live into it. Another pastor said, I feel like we are not at all informed about what marketplace mission is. So overcoming the traditional beliefs of some who see full-time ministry workers as the best cross-cultural mission worker is a challenge. In fact, the opposite is the truth, what I just quoted. And the comment I mentioned earlier, we are calling our people to discipleship in the workplace. Our hope is that some will catch a vision to work and live in hard places. And as I've wrestled and talked with, and this came out in the focus group that I won't say too much about, but can answer in questions. But one of the fundamental challenges is the understanding of work and faith in the church. So many of our churches just do not have a strong understanding of work and faith. And so I've been connecting with a number of work and faith leaders in Canada. So I think as I summarize, as I close, we noted that 80% of the pastors surveyed responded positively, but less than 20 of their churches have intentionally sent a marketplace worker. And we really feel this suggests an opportunity to support and equip pastors to implement the model for their communities. We also noted that there are concerns amongst pastors for marketplace workers training, cross-cultural and theological training. We believe that mission agencies and training institutions have resources, but the delivery systems don't fit the marketplace. So how are we going to strengthen that partnership? We noted also that there was the most common relationship between church and agency is the marketplace worker introducing the agency to the church. But pastors appear to rate agency helpfulness quite low. And so how can agencies strengthen this relationship? And finally, teaching and preaching on vocation as calling was the most commonly reported way in which pastors supported the development of marketplace mission. But in my subsequent discussion with Canadian work and faith leaders, it suggests that more could be done in this space. And I'll close with this last slide. So next steps. So I'm working currently with a collaboration of Lausanne, Canada, the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, Canadian Centre for Christian Charities, the 4Cs, and the Canadian Higher Education Council under the umbrella of Our Common Calling, a collaboration of those groups. Just coming alongside faith and work movements in Canada. So that's the Faith and Work Network, the Canadian Christian Business Federation, Random Access Networks, Praxis Labs supporting entrepreneurs. Philip Yan is in that space. James Bruin is Faith and Work. Keith Knight is Canadian Christian Business Federation. And we're starting a project to identify the work and faith resources out there, to collect inspirational workplace stories, and to promote them for use in local churches. And our belief is that if we can put energy into the work and faith aspect of church life, because pastors have told us they believe in this model, if we can, that as that one pastor said, would generate a more healthy connection between people's work life Monday to Friday and their church life on Sunday, which would also begin to free up people to consider working and discipling people through their work cross-culturally. And that's my current passion